Promised Land is a documentary that I started in 2004, and it follows two communities, black communities in South Africa, that were removed from their land during apartheid. And when the ANC, the Democratic elected government, was elected, they put in a process for black communities that had been removed to regain their land. And so my film follows two black communities that are trying to regain their land that they were removed from. And it also tells the story of the white farmers who currently own the land. I became involved in the subject because of the news reports that were coming in around about 2003 that we were getting about what was happening in Zimbabwe and the land stuff that was going on in Zimbabwe, where Mugabe, the president, was taking land from the white farmers, who, Zimbabwe has their own history of colonialism and the same inequity of land. And Mugabe was taking land from the white farmers, and he actually wasn't giving it back to the landless. And the country was kind of in turmoil, and still is, largely because of what happened. I was reading the news reports, and I just felt the coverage was very not complete and ahistorical. The sympathies were, look at these poor white farmers, they're getting their land taken away from them, the country's in crisis, as opposed to looking at the history of colonialism and the background, the context of why this was happening. And then I read that South Africa had the same land inequity, and at that point, that was 10 years after the end of apartheid. And then also the white farmers who were, currently on the land, and I just became fascinated with it. Even though South Africa had a similar land inequity in that, 87% of the land was owned by the small 12% or 10% of the whites, that South Africa was trying a different path because of the problems that had that had occurred in the way that Zimbabwe was doing it. And I thought it would be very interesting to see, now that they had this pressure from what was going on in Zimbabwe, how that was affecting their own land reform process. I went in initially having expectations that, the white South Africans, the white landowners were, going to be rabidly racist and very reluctant to talk to me, and again, because of all that I had read and heard, and some of the Afrikaners that I'd met in the States confirmed that. But going there and doing this project and going there over, over a 4-year period, and getting to understand where the white farmers, where they're coming from in terms of their connection to the land, and in terms of their reluctance to give it up, not only because of their connection to the land, but I was very interested to explore how do you, if you're a white person of a certain age in South Africa, and if you weren't a part of the end of apartheid movement, a part of the end, there were tons of whites who were, but if you weren't, if you're just living your life, voted for the National Party, voted the apartheid government in, it wasn't a dictatorship, they were voted in by the whites. What do you do now that the situation is reversed in some ways, in that it is a black government and a black run country? Where do you, and not only what do you do in terms of, but how do you fit into the society? And I think that that's part of the land issue as well, because land is part of identity for both blacks and whites. Land is obviously, for the black population, it's part of the injustice that was done in the country, and for a lot of the white farmers, I have people. Pretoria says in the film, it wasn't one of the white characters. It wasn't the current landowners who took the land away. Why should we have to pay? And it was a government law. It wasn't our fault. And I think that's, that says it right there in terms of, and you can understand that. Why is it that these, current white landowners have to have their land taken away? that's one part of the complexity, the whole, racial identity, justice, who should pay, who shouldn't. I think another part of the complexity is the fact that South Africa has a lot of issues that they're facing now. Everything from, a high crime rate to a high HIV rate to joblessness. There's a lot of challenges in the country, education. So, the country has a lot to solve. It's only been 14 years. We're in 2008. So, yeah, it's only been 14 years. How much can a country do to reverse this, long history of oppression and apartheid? And the promises that they made to redistribute 30% of land in 5 years are obvious, have shown to be out of reach. I try to show the complexity in the film that even though they haven't reached their goals and it has been very slow, it is still happening. I mean, there is, and it is still happening very, very slow and very, very heatedly, but it is happening. You can't say that it is, that it's a failure, and you can't say that it's a success. Viewers can see the completed film by checking out the website www.promisedlandfilm.com. So that's www.promisedland film.com. And in the section that has screenings, it will list the upcoming screenings. This is such an amazing moment to be alive, and though there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world and we know it, there are a lot of creative ways that people are trying to solve problems, and I hope that viewing this film you can see one of the ways, and then I encourage audience members to look at the other ways that are happening around the world, and then how can we do that? How can we incorporate what's happening around the world in our local communities?